Hi, welcome to Talking Books and Stuff, the program that talks all about books and writing and stuff. Here's your host, Dennis Rimmer.
Hello again and welcome back to Talking Books and Writing and Stuff, and today we're talking about books and writing and poetry and photography with Canada's greatest rock critic and writer and photographer, Jeffrey Morgan. We found him somewhere in Eastern Ontario in the 416 area code. So, hey, how have things been for you for the last couple of years as we battled all of this COVID stuff and looking forward to the future?
I'm doing very well.
You're doing well?
I'm doing very well. Against all odds, during the middle of a global pandemic, when everybody's going out of business, including bookstores and book companies, and nobody's allowed to go out and do anything, I was blessed enough, thanks to God, to get a book contract and get a book out at the most unlikeliest time, because I've been trying to do this for decades, and I had no success. And just when I expected nothing to happen, that's when everything happened.
And the book we're talking about is called, to fill us in.
It's called Rock Critic Confidential, which is very easy for you to look up. You put it in your browser, your DuckDuckGo, whatever you want to use. You put in Rock Critic Confidential. If you put it in quotes, it'll come up probably as the third or fourth entry automatically. And then you can go to the bookmonger of your choice and you can buy it if you're so inclined. Or you can wait until everybody doesn't like it and sells it for $1.50, and then you can probably get a discount.
And it's called Rock Critic Confidential. It's a hardcover coffee table book containing over 50 years of Morgan's writing and photography. It's Jeffrey Morgan we're talking with, and apparently...
That's JEFFREYMORGAN for those of you who are listening at home.
That's right, and scoring from home. We're broadcasting from east to west. So you were born apparently the same day that Bill Haley and his Comets, not the Comets, his Comets released Rock Around the Clock. Is that right?
Yeah, isn't that funny?
Yep.
Or as Bob Hope would say, yeah, boy, I want to tell you, ain't that something?
These golf courses, I tell you. So, what, you published something in your, when you were 11 or 12 in a high school or junior high school book?
Yeah, something like that. It was a little pamphlet that came out that I don't know, I was like 11 years old, and they had like a little newsletter that would come out for the school, for Brown School, and I would submit poems to them and they would print them. And fortuitously enough, I found it and I put it in the book just because, I think, as I said, like years later I ended up having, my poetry printed in Rolling Stone. So it was kind of ridiculous that 12 years later that would happen to me.
So it's like you've made a living during this through all these years, the 60s, 70s, 80s, 90s, 2000s, etc. How did that come?
No.
How did that
no,
come?
I didn't.
Nope.
No, I didn't. Nope. I didn't make a living out of it. As Ian Hunter once said to me when I interviewed Ian Hunter, he said, "I don't understand how writers can make a living," because he'd put out Diary of a Rock Star in various iterations, and he never got any money for it. No, I can't make a living from this. I realized I was smart enough at a very young age to realize that I had enough talent to fool people into thinking that I could do things, but I realized that I didn't have enough talent to make a living out of it, which is why I spent 34 years working for the federal government of Canada while I was doing this, because otherwise, it's impossible. You're not going to make any money doing this. So I had a government job. I got up at 6 a.m. and I went to a 9-to-5 job for 34 years while I was doing all of this in my spare time. So that's how I ended up making a living, because first of all, I didn't make a living out of the photography because nobody saw the photographs for 50 years. I kept them in a shoebox.
Oh, no.
And when you're making, like whatever, $15 or $10 for a record review, you can't live on that. So because I had a government job for 34 years, I wasn't dependent on any writing that I did to do it as for a living, to make any money to buy groceries or pay the rent. Therefore, I had the luxury of only writing when I wanted to write, and I had the luxury of only writing and talking to people that I wanted to talk to. Because when you end up writing for a magazine or a newspaper, or you're doing it to make money to live off of, then you're at the mercy of who you're working for, because you have to do whatever they tell you to do. So you have to review records and interview people that you're not really interested in, but you have to do it because it's part of the job. And if you don't do it, you won't get any money, and you won't be able to pay your rent and buy groceries. I didn't have that problem because I had a day job, which I never quit. So I could do whatever I wanted essentially as a hobby. And that's why a friend of mine graciously said years ago, the reason why your stuff is so good is because 99% of your stuff is so good is because you only spoke to people and did what you wanted to do. So I self-assigned myself things. So I only ended up writing about things that I was a fan of, that I wanted to, or if I bought a lousy record and I wanted to get my money back, then I write the review to get my money back. But I never had to do it for a living.
And I was just going to say, that must mean why you've got this unique style where some of them look like, the reviews look like screenplays, or you record a telephone conversation pretty much verbatim, or not make-up stuff, but your review
Oh yeah, make-up stuff, definitely.
Well, your review of the Bob Dylan Christian-type record was pretty harsh, but then, like you're saying, you didn't have to please anybody. So is that the secret maybe to your success?
Well, the secret is that when I was writing for Cream, the editors at Cream allowed me pretty much to write anything I wanted to. And I ended up writing TV parodies and radio parodies and things like that, just to entertain people and to keep myself amused, and Cream printed everything that I wrote. And so that was the thing. The reason why all the interviews are done in question and answer, they sort of frowned upon it at the time. They wanted you to write and, do a narrative, and every time I wrote something like that, it was horrible, because I wasn't interested in doing that kind of writing. And one of the strengths that I have, contrary to what your listeners will believe, is that I'm really good at conversations and really good at talking to rock stars and having a conversation with them. And I found that the best way to convey that was just through straight dialogue, just doing a straight transcription. And it worked out very well.
And we're talking with Jeffrey Morgan. The new book, if you're a rock person interested in rock music, is called Rock Critic Confidential. It's from New Haven Publishing, which apparently is based in England. Is that right, Jeffrey?
I'm in Canada. My publisher is in England. The publisher's founder lives in Oslo, Norway. It's a global affair.
It's a global affair. It sounds like something right out of Ottawa. I'm flipping through my digital copy of your book, Rock Critic Confidential. Came to page 52 with the Sparks. This town ain't big enough for the both of us, so one of us is going to have to leave. And apparently they're making some sort of a comeback. There's a documentary out about them, stuff like that.
There's a documentary that I started watching, which is called The Sparks Brothers, and so far it seems to be okay.
So can you tell us about the Sparks?
They're great. I mean, they were wonderful. They're a wonderful band. They're still a wonderful band. They were great to interview. And the thing about it is, if anybody gets the book and reads the dialogue, the conversations, it just basically lets you know how these people are when they know they're being recorded, but it's not really a cut and dried interview session. So during the Sparks interview, I'm having breakfast with them in a hotel the night after their concert, and basically the conversation is just about ordering food and what kind of food they get. When I was interviewing Lou Reed, we did that over lunch, so there's a lot of talking about ordering drinks and ordering lunch. And it's a lot more interesting. Well, basically, these people are interesting to talk to. And if you just let them talk, it gives you a side of them that you wouldn't see normally.
And the interview he's talking about is with Ron and Russell from the Sparks. Are they twins?
They're not twins, but they're brothers.
They're brothers. And like the section I'm reading just says something like, Ron says something, blah, blah, and then Russell says, "Can I get some milk, please, for the tea?" So, exactly.
Well, that's the same thing. That's the same thing. When in the Lou Reed interview, because I had transcribed the tapes verbatim, I'm talking to Lou Reed, and then Lou Reed looks over at the waiter and he says, "Can we order off of you, or are you here just for looks?" And that's the kind of flavor, and that's the kind of thing that you don't get normally. If somebody has an agenda that either likes Lou Reed or doesn't like Lou Reed, and then they color it with their opinions, and you just don't get to feel that you're sitting at the next table leaning over and eavesdropping to what these people are actually saying. And that's the kind of thing that fascinates me. I'm not really interested in listening to somebody's opinion about who they're interviewing or setting it up. I just like to feel that if I were sitting at a table next to Lou Reed, or if I was sitting next to the Mail brothers, I would be sort of, wishing that the music wasn't as loud so I could listen to what these people are talking about. And by and large, because these people are highly intelligent, otherwise they wouldn't be at the point where they are, anything that they have to say is amusing or interesting or entertaining.
And another one you're talking about has got like the world exclusive Keith Richards and Johnny Depp hire cream hacks, and it's like a movie review almost, and Musso and Frank's grill story. So I understand what you're saying. We're talking with Jeffrey Morgan, by the way. Latest book is Rock Critic Confidential. Pictures and interviews, transcriptions of rock bands throughout the years. Do you have actually a favorite band of all?
Well, probably the Beatles, because you can't beat the Beatles. I saw the Beatles in 1964, and it's been downhill since then. So,
I had never lucky enough to see the Beatles. I was living in...
Well, go on. Where were you living?
Oh, out west, Crescent Beach, White Rock, south of Vancouver. And they were coming to Vancouver in August of 64, and we moved from the west coast to the flatlands in June of 64. So my friends went. One guy said he saw Ringo Starr. He was over the tunnel and saw him run below the tunnel. And another friend of mine, her and her family bought tickets. They were like $20 for the four of them. So there you go. I missed out my big chance. So
don't worry about it, Dennis, because as you know, on page 96 of the book, you have something in common with Gene Simmons, because Gene Simmons never got to see Kiss either, and he regrets it to this day.
Got to see Kiss or got to see the Beatles?
I'm sorry, he didn't get to see the Beatles.
And his wife, Gene Simmons' wife, Shannon Tweed, apparently comes from Saskatoon. So
it's a small world.
It's a small world.
A lot of people, great people came from Saskatchewan. Bret the Hitman Hart, if I'm not mistaken.
Calgary and I think basically Calgary, because Stu Hart, his father, had Stampede Wrestling.
Right, the Dungeon.
Yep, and the funny thing is, after I moved back to Saskatoon for 3 years in high school, some buddies and I went to the wrestling. We're off topic here with Jeffrey Morgan, but so what? We went to the Saskatoon Arena for, all-star wrestling kind of thing. One of the guys was great. Rocky Johnson, who is The Rock's father.
Oh, you're kidding?
Yes. And
Rocky Maivia.
And what I remember the most was he's the first guy, Rocky Johnson, I ever saw who had tattoos. He had bluebirds on each pec, one on each side. I went, oh my God, this guy's great. Next thing I know, The Rock is a big star, so I guess that's where he got his name from, maybe, in honor of his father.
Very good.
I think his father's from Halifax or something like that. But anyway, back to Jeffrey Morgan. The book is Rock Critic Confidential, what they call a coffee table book. Get it from your favorite bookmonger. And back to the Saskatoon connection. You apparently were in Saskatoon in the 90s and did some work at CFCR.
Yes, I did.
And so did my wife and I, and we were on the board of directors, so you probably ran into Ron Spizzeri.
No, around, it was 90 and 91. The only people whose names I remember from that time, there was Theo Keeble, and there was Ted Stensrud, who I believe was the station manager, and they were there when I had a radio show during that time. So it would have been around 90, 91.
Ron is what did Night Dreams, something like that. So apparently he's been doing that ever since the station started. So maybe you just didn't cross paths. That's all. So
maybe I'm just an old man who can't remember things anymore, which is why I took over 1,000 rock photos, so that when I got to this point, I would remember what the concerts were like.
He had a record shop, Rolling Records or Records on Wheels or something like that. So.
Oh yeah, Records on Wheels, sure.
Yep.
That was the only real record store that was in town, yeah.
Yeah, that was Ron's. So there you go.
There you go.
Everybody knows everybody. Yes, like you said, Rock Critic Confidential with Jeffrey Morgan. He's now, I'm sure you're based in the Toronto area. Living with,
sir.
Do you get a government pension and everything?
Yeah.
Wow. Just like my dad.
Well, that's the key. If you want to be a successful rock critic, don't give up your day job because it doesn't make anything.
That's right. Oh, and by the way, we know Theo as well, and apparently he just left the station a few years ago and opened a comic book novelty type store.
That perfectly makes sense, yeah.
But then it had to fold, so I haven't caught up to him since then. But anyway, Theo was there for a long, long time. Rock Critic Confidential, Bob Dylan. Like I said, your review of the Bob Dylan Christian type record, you were pretty harsh with that one, but that doesn't seem to bother you?
No, I'm pretty harsh with anything. The whole point is, as long as you're making it entertaining, as long as it's funny, and as long as it makes people laugh, that's the main thing. The main thing isn't really to review the record so that somebody will know whether they want to buy it or not. The main thing for me was just to entertain people and to do something that was funny and humorous.
And they certainly are funny and humorous. But you saw the Beatles. Did you ever interview any of the Beatles?
No.
No. And I just lost my copy because Dropbox stopped apparently, but that's the way things go. So what are you doing these days? Still the same kind of stuff?
No, I'm not doing anything. I'm just sitting around. Just sitting here in my swank bachelor pad, just me and my memories. That's it.
Okay. And the website is just www.jeffreymorgan.info?
No, just have people go to google.com or whatever they're using, type in Rock Critic Confidential. Don't ask, just buy it. It's got 200 photos that have never been seen of pretty much every rock band in the universe, all taken when they were in their youthful prime, in their late 20s, and the photos, frankly, are better than the writing in the book. So if anybody likes to look at pretty pictures of young rock stars, there's a couple of hundred of them in the book which have never been seen before, which are all world-class professional-grade photos.
And they are. Take my word for it, because I'm DR the book guy. And we're talking with Jeffrey Morgan. So you also done authorized biographies of Alice Cooper and Iggy Pop and the Stooges. So what kind of secrets can you divulge about good old Alice Cooper?
Alice Cooper's a nice guy.
That's what I've heard.
Alice Cooper.
Yep.
Yeah, he is. I ended up, I guess, inadvertently. Alice Cooper was my number one rock and roll hero in the 70s, and it's just odd that I ended up meeting him and being his biographer. But he's a very nice man. He's a very intelligent man, and it's the great thing, which as I mentioned in the book. The great thing about meeting your rock heroes is finding out that they're nicer in person than they are in the record. When you listen to a record that they have done or anything, to meet them and know that all the time and money you have invested into them, that it paid off because they're just good human beings, that's a very nice thing to find out. And that's one of the most rewarding things that I've found out, is meeting people and knowing that they're good human beings, that they have a good sense of humor, and that your time and money that you invested in them in making them millionaires wasn't wasted.
And that they seem to be, like you said, genuinely nice people, and humble. Like we talked with Andy Kim a while back, and he was like, amazed that anybody would want to talk to him. And I'm saying to him, what? You're Andy Kim, man. Everybody loves your records, and you're amazed that some guy in Saskatchewan wants to talk to you. Come on, you're great. Thanks for having me on your show, kind of thing. So
you feel like you're thanking them and they're thanking you, and you don't understand.
And I don't understand why. How about Iggy Pop? He's still going strong.
Yeah, that's the thing that I'm fortunate with. I ended up being the biographer of these people who are truly legendary performers, who are still alive and who are still doing it. And like I said, my faith in them wasn't disappointed.
And speaking of bands from the old, now I have a quandary. Like, if Paul McCartney and Ringo Starr went back on the road with Sean Lennon and Julian Lennon and Zach Starkey, would that be the Beatles, or would it be Paul and Ringo with some guys?
It would be exactly the same as when Robert Plant and Jimmy Page went on stage, and they couldn't call themselves Led Zeppelin. And that's why they didn't sell out Maple Leaf Gardens, and that's why they didn't sell out, Madison Square Gardens, and they were playing small halls, because even though it's with the two guys, if you don't have the name, that makes all the difference. I mean, it was Jimmy Page and Robert Plant. It was basically, if you closed your eyes, it would be Led Zeppelin. Because no one's going to really realize that the bass playing's any different. They can get a drummer and they just did small halls. They did not do big business because it didn't say Led Zeppelin. And so if you don't have that name, it's not going to mean anything. That's why it's very hard to get a book out. If I'm truly blessed, it really is a gift of God, to have this book out, because nobody knows who I am. You can't get a book that's an anthology of rock writing and an anthology of photography, especially in a hardcover coffee table book. Nobody's going to put it out. If I wanted to write a book on Lou Reed, maybe somebody would put it out because it would say Lou Reed.
Right.
And it would have a photograph of Lou Reed on the cover, and Lou Reed fans might buy it. But when you have a generic book that's just a bunch of writing by somebody that they've never heard of that person, no one's going to buy it. And so it's very challenging. That's why the lady at New Haven took a real leap of faith to do this. Now, granted, Courtney Love is on the cover. It's a great photo of Courtney Love. She's wearing a cream T-shirt. It's got the Boy Howley logo. So those things will offset the fact that there's a big byline by a name that nobody knows. But underneath the byline, it says Alice Cooper, it says Iggy Pop, and the Stooges. So that offsets the fact that nobody knows who I am and nobody cares who I am. But I've got enough things on the cover to make it interesting that if anybody sees that cover in a bookstore, they'll do the traditional double take and they'll look at it again, because it's so striking and out of the ordinary of what is being put out these days. But no, if anybody goes on tour and it's not the Beatles and it's not Led Zeppelin, you could have Steven Tyler and Joe Perry go on tour and they can call it anything. And if it doesn't say Aerosmith, they're not going to sell a ticket.
Right. But then there's some bands like, I don't know, Lynyrd Skynyrd. There's like one or two original members, but they're still called Lynyrd Skynyrd. And to me, that's more like a cover band.
Well, you will have a vast number of people who will tell you till their dying day, to quote a Led Zeppelin song, that any band that does not have Ace Frehley and Peter Criss in it is not Kiss. So as long as you've got the guys, you see, and that's the thing.
Yeah.
Gene Simmons and Paul Stanley, they're no schmoes. They realize that they're not going to go on tour as Stanley and Simmons because they're not going to sell a ticket.
All right.
But they own the title, they own the name, so they could just put whoever they wanted in it.
And it's like in the old days, there was like I don't know how many, 8 or 9 different traveling bands calling themselves the Coasters. It was Cornell Gunther and the Coasters, and somebody else's, Fred Smith's Coasters, and I guess.
Well, look at right now, right? When everything gets back to normal, you're going to have at some casino somewhere, you're going to be able to go see Grand Funk Railroad. Now, the question is it Grand Funk without Mark Farner? And a lot of people would say, no, it's not.
Correct.
So you've got, so you're going to, you might have Don Brewer, you might have Mel Shazer, you might have the guy singing American Band. But if you haven't got the guy with the long hair, and the armbands and the headband playing guitar, you've got to question whether it's really Grand Funk Railroad. And that's the problem. To purists like me, it really isn't.
That's the same with me and the Eagles. Like, is that really the Eagles? Although there's 2 or 3 original members, but not really original members, so I don't know what to say.
When I went to see Alice once, one of the opening acts, it was like a three thing, and one of the opening acts was Foghat. And I don't think anybody in Foghat from the original band was in the band. They were all dead.
Right.
So like Lonesome Dave wasn't. Nobody was in there. But they were called Foghat, and they did all the hits. But I don't think anybody was in the band. They were all gone. So I'm kind of a purist like that. I kind of figure, the closest that you can get with that is, when John Bonham's son filled in, at the O2 Arena,
right,
and did the Led Zeppelin thing, and that was fine. I'll give a pass to that because he's a family member and he drummed like his father, and it was fun. But other than that, at some point you have to just sort of
shake your head
because,
like you said, it's because whoever owns the name, quote unquote. So it's all business, more than show. Because without any business, there's no show, and without any show, there's no business. But sometimes the tentacles wrap around the wrong side of the equation, in my opinion. Jeffrey Morgan, it's been a blast and a half. I thank you very much for taking time to talk with a podcast guy in rural Saskatchewan who
Dennis,
plays hockey once a week.
No, Dennis, I would like to apologize to all your listeners who have been bored to death listening to this guy that they don't know talk about a book that they haven't bought yet. But ladies and gentlemen, let me tell you right now, Rock Critic Confidential, it's my life's work. But more importantly, it's got 200, if you can't read, it's okay. It's got 200 pictures, pretty pictures of rock stars in their youthful prime. Everybody that you'd want to see. So it's worth the price of admission just to look at the pictures. And if you can happen to read, the rating's pretty good too.
It's
now,
pretty
keep
good.
In
it's
mind,
excellent.
I'm no Joel Sullivan. I'm not writing Altamont, okay?
Yep.
But then again, Joel's book was also a hardcover, but it didn't have any color photos. It just had a bunch of little black and white photos that you've seen a million times. Folks, these photos have never been seen by anybody.
And Joel Selvin...
Rock Critic Confidential.
Yep, Rock Critic Confidential by Jeffrey Morgan. By the way, Joel Selvin has been a guest with us as well.
I know, he was on your show last week.
Yep, with Hollywood Eden. So that's great. Thank you very much. Let me just say once again, it's really, honestly, it's been a treat, and CFCR is still rocking strong.
You are very kind to want to speak with me. As I said, if the suicide rate goes up statistically after people have listened to this, I'll understand completely. Stay away from the razors. Stay away. Don't put your head in that plastic bag.
Okay.
Rock Critic Confidential. It'll save your life, ladies and gentlemen. You have my guarantee on it. Rock Critic Confidential. If you're depressed, if you're lonely, it will say you'll be a little poorer, but it'll be worth it. Thank you.
It will be worth it. Jeffrey Morgan with us here on Talking Books and Writing and Stuff. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Dennis. I appreciate it.
Thank you for visiting with us today. This is Talking Books and Stuff with Dennis Rimmer. Contact him at dennis@talkingbooks.tk. Thank you, and may all the good news be yours. Oh, and don't forget to check out his book, The Great Canadian Notebook, available across Canada and at amazon.ca.